Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
Beach FM 106.3, and we'd like to make very welcome to the program now Sophie Handford. Of course, we're very proud of her as a Kapiti Coast District Councillor. She was National Coordinator of the School Strike for Climate New Zealand, and now I believe she's an organiser of something called Vote Climate 2020. Sophie Handford, good morning and welcome to you.
Sure, thank you, John.
But I happen to know you're a very busy young woman because I've been chasing you for quite some time to get this interview.
I know, apologies.
I know you're a busy young woman.
But I'm glad we have the chance to chat now.
That's right, and I look forward to them. However, what is Vote Climate 2020?
Great question. So Vote Climate 2020 is something that a group of friends and I from across the country decided to begin after having been involved quite heavily in the School Strike for Climate movement, but this year kind of mentoring that movement, so wanting to put out energy somewhere that supports the demands of the School Strike for Climate, but that also builds momentum behind climate change as an election issue moving into the election this year, because we know that we only have 3 election cycles to take the necessary action to halve our emissions if we want to be in with a chance of staying below 1.5 degrees of warming. So that's not long, and for us the realisation that we actually do only have 10 years and only 3 election cycles meant that we wanted to come together and see how we could use our skills to kind of try and create more of a dialogue around climate change heading into this year's election. So we're putting pressure on local candidates, but we're also we're doing that through making sure that we've got teams of people and lots of young people as well showing up to the election debates and asking questions, and we'll be providing some resources and tools to support people to be able to ask the kinds of questions that might be relevant specifically to climate change and being on a path to climate justice. But we're also holding events in communities across the country for the 10 Fridays in the lead up to the election. So we've had 3 so far in Kapiti. We've done some chalking in Parapara Beach last Friday, so that everyone who went along to the market could see beautiful chalk art all along the waterfront, and also kind of seeping into the township a little bit. And then this week, so this Friday, we're doing a walk, talk and chalk event, so we're going to be taking our placards along Kapiti Road and just kind of getting the word out as well about the importance of voting climate and what that means, considering we've got such little time. So it's a few different things, but essentially the aim is to build momentum behind climate change as an election issue this year by also creating a space for people to pledge their vote to climate justice. So we're kind of putting pressure on candidates, but we're also trying to raise awareness of the kind of influence that people can have with their vote, and the ability that we have if we all unite behind kind of common issues and a common vision, the impact we can have through using our votes to kind of dictate what that future looks like, and really using our votes purposefully and making sure that we do vote and we do enrol to vote is another thing. We're trying to get young people enrolled to vote.
Too right, please do.
Yeah, because this election we've got the lowest, in comparison to last election, I think 3% less youth are enrolled at this time in comparison to this time last election. So it's a huge thing that we really need to be pushing and making sure that we've got that support for young people to enrol and they know how to do it, and the process is readily available for them.
The right to vote is such a precious gift that democracy gives us, and I just hope that people realise that before it's too late. Now,
100% agree. Yeah.
Now, Sophie, I introduced you as a Kapiti Coast District Councillor, and that's misleading in this context because you're not speaking as a councillor, and I suspect that you're not speaking in a sort of a partisan political way as well, because this is not related to a party, as I understand it.
You're exactly right, and thank you for bringing that up, because it's really important to make clear, is that in my view, climate change and ensuring that we have a future for our next generation is something that should transcend politics and political boundaries and all of those different things, and also party politics. And I think for me and for my friends who I kind of put this together alongside, we're really interested in how we can just increase the dialogue, and I'm doing that in my capacity as an individual, as a citizen, as someone who as you said, wants to use the ability that we have to be involved in democracy to be able to make a difference. So I'm just kind of doing this because I know that it needs to be done, and there's so many people as well who are joining us because they just know it needs to be done. So you're right, it's kind of an aside to my council work, as was School Strike for Climate, and I'm still supporting that as well. We've got our next major climate strike on the 4th of September, so that's coming up pretty soon, and as well this Vote Climate kind of campaign and the events will be also leading into that 4th of September strike, where we're hoping to mobilise hopefully more than 170,000, so that was the number we had last September. So we're really kind of building up to that as well. But again, that's work that I'm doing as an individual, as someone who who recognises the power that we can have, because we have the right to vote. We have the society where we're able to protest, we're able to make our voice heard in those kinds of ways. So yeah, let's use it and do what we can while we can. You're so right. I 100% agree with that. Yeah.
I tend to think that we've got the duty to vote as well, because if you go right back to formation of democracy, the citizens of ancient Rome, they had to contribute. I mean, that was part of being a citizen. So I think we've got to get out there and do the thing.
Exactly.
You certainly are. Sophie, I wonder if I can get on to a generational aspect of this. Would you say that most of the people involved in Vote Climate 2020 are younger people?
We're starting to see a shift. I think when I was involved in School Strike for Climate last year, obviously it was mainly young people, and we kind of did that quite purposefully in the way that the team was structured, that it was a youth-led movement. But it's obviously really important because young people can't do it all on our own. No generation can do it by themselves. No one person can do this by themselves and can stop climate change by themselves. So for us, the movement last year for climate justice was very much youth-led, and I think we saw that. But I think this year with the election, we're seeing that shift a little bit, because it does tend to be that older generation that does vote, that's enrolled. So I think we're seeing that generation really kind of step in and support us and support. So they're supporting me and they're supporting me to be able to support my peers, to be able to kind of mobilise them and get them enrolled. So I think also now the fact that we've got 3 election cycles to take the necessary action, I think for a lot of adults who maybe have had the chance to vote many times are starting to realise the importance of their vote for that generation, for my generation and for the generations to come, and that's kind of creating that intergenerational kind of solidarity and relationship, and I think that's really important. And I think also another thing probably to add to that is through COVID, I think that was a huge kind of development. There was a real development in that relationship too across the generation. So being involved in the Student Volunteer Army and the Self-Isolation Support Kapiti, that was young people supporting our older generation, and now I think there's a real desire to kind of strengthen those relationships for resilience if, fingers crossed we don't, but if we had another wave of COVID, but also the impacts of climate change, how are we going to make sure that those relationships are there so that in general our community is as resilient as it can be? So I think we're really starting to see that, and I think we saw that particularly, like, I think lockdown maybe influenced that COVID situation, but I also think the election and the kind of narrative that we're trying to frame in the lead up to the election, I think is influencing that. So I'm really starting to see quite a shift, but last year I definitely noticed that there were mainly young people in the climate space, but it's really cool actually to be able to kind of see, because we found a lot as well, like the older generation were kind of like, oh, it's awesome that young people are doing this, it gives us so much hope. And as Greta says, we don't want your hope, we want you to act.
Precisely.
And that's exactly what we want. We can't do it on our own, and frankly, we need the knowledge and we need the experience and we need the learnings and the skills, and we just need everything that we possibly can get on board. And with that, it's really important that we have that intergenerational support.
Now, Sophie, do you think that there is a particular, I was going to say duty, do you think there is part of the equation that young people have got to educate the older people a bit? Because frankly, many older people are quite frankly bemused by climate change. It is such an enormous subject, and it's difficult to know what we as individuals can do. Certainly a little nation like New Zealand, if we got all together, as we've just proved with a team of 5 million, we can achieve a lot. But do you think that younger people have the responsibility of letting older people know how this could work?
Yes, definitely. And something that was run by School Strike for Climate and Generation Zero, which is a youth climate group in the lead up to the local government elections last year, was a campaign called Elbow Your Elders, which was precisely that.
Right.
It was young people going into rest homes even and talking to their grandparents and taking photos of those kinds of conversations they were having to kind of symbolize that as well. And I mean, for me, like I had a conversation with my grandparents about it in the lead up, about climate change in the lead up to the local government elections, and they got quite emotional about it because they were like, oh, we didn't quite realize what kind of future we might be passing on to you. And it feels, it's quite a hard thing to talk about, I think, across those generations, but it's an important conversation to have. And I think that through I think you're right, like through kind of educating each other, because obviously we've got things to teach, but also the older generation have things to teach us. We can really strengthen the movement, but also continue to kind of build that momentum. And I think it's just important that those conversations are had, even though I know for me and my grandparents it was quite an emotional conversation to have, just because you're right, like they weren't super aware of the kind of situation, whereas for me growing up and trying to think about my future and then realizing what the reality might be, it's kind of more apparent for me because I'm thinking, whereas for them, they're kind of, I think very much trying to live in the moment or thinking about, their next kind of 5-10 years, whereas for me, I'm thinking about my next 50 years. That's right. And that's a long time in advance, but also, anything could happen in those 50 years. Like we have no idea. So it's really important. But elbow your elders, I think, is something that will continue. Hopefully, not elbow in a violent way. Just
I know
a
what you
little
mean.
Nudge,
I think it's a lovely concept. I really do. And to be fair to your grandparents and people of their generation, this has been an evolving realization about the climate. And that's why I think many of the older people are just bemused by it, because more and more comes out. And it is just so enormous, whereas you have got almost the whole package. Well, package up until now, because it is evolving. And therefore, perhaps you can present it in a way which is more attainable for the older people. So perhaps that is what Vote Climate 2020 is all about. Perhaps that's the nub of it.
That's great. I really like that. Thanks for giving me some ideas, John.
Perhaps we can do it again sometime. Sophie Handford.
Sounds great. Lovely to talk with you.
Excellent.
Always, John.
And speaking this morning as organiser of Vote Climate 2020, I thank you so much for joining us this morning.
106.3 Beach FM.